Hello and welcome. Today I want to talk about two models of shortwave receivers which are very famous and notable for their good reception and portability. That is the Sony ICF SW7600G and the GR model. Now these two models came out a couple years apart from each other, and they do have a feature set that's pretty similar to each other and UI for the most part. But there's a couple of differences with them, between them, and the technology that's inside of them. These models and their lineup began back in the early 1970s, and they were produced in the late 1970s. And during the 1980s, they began to use phase lock loop systems and added single sideband reception to their lineup. And since the late 80s, early 90s, they started introducing more of a direct keypad entry lineup, and also introducing tuning on the single sideband, not in just 5 kHz steps, but in 1 kHz steps, meaning you get a little bit more accuracy in tuning around on the sideband. Now, the latest model that they released is no longer in production, the SW7600GR. It was produced from 2001 to about 2018 when they discontinued it. They can be found on the used market, although they're kind of hard to find and very pricey. The older models are a little bit less pricey, and they have a little bit more of a nice vintage feel to them, if you will. They do offer less features than the most recent one. However, they do have good sound quality. Now, in most of these radios, since they're so old, including the GR lineup, the electrolytic capacitors tend to dry out, and you do have to replace them or resolder new ones in if you're good with that. So what we have here on the table today, we'll go over it from left to right. We have the Kenwood TH F6A. That's one of my all-time favorite reception tri-band ham radios. It's a very small receiver, and we'll go over that in a moment compared to the Sonys here. In the middle, we have the SW7600G, which the early models came out beginning in 1994. And on the right here, we have the SW7600GR, which came out in 2001, replacing the 7600G. So let's go over some of the physical features of the Sonys here, and we'll take the Kenwood off the table for a moment. We'll compare that in just a little bit. As you can see on the top here, we have the full keypad entry section with direct and execute functions. We'll notice on the older 7600, the power button is a slide for a lock. You'd slide it down and you can't engage the power. If you want to engage it, you slide it up and you push the on-off button. We have the sleep button here on the top. Standby memory buttons here. 3 buttons on the bottom. The bottom one activates when you have the radio on. You can lock out the keypad so you don't accidentally push a button while in operation. We have the enter button for setting time, and then we have the scan stop AM band button down here. And then we have the tuning knobs, the bigger steps, which is 5 kHz, and the finer tuning, which is more of a 1 kHz tuning. And we have the light button on the top, which we'll go over in a moment. We have the sync lock LED and the tune LED inside, and that's important to note. On the front here on the 7600, the light button is actually on the front near the speaker grill here. So it takes up a little spot here, as you can see. The UI interface is a little bit different, although it does carry the same features as this and some added ones. We have a hold button which can be activated while the radio is quote-unquote off, so you can't push the on-off button. Meanwhile, this one's more of a physical one, and this one's also a physical one, but in a different location, so that's a difference. The sleep button got a little smaller here on the top, and the on-off button, for all intents and purposes, is the same. We have the same keypad. We have the FM, AM buttons, and the direct and execute buttons. And then in this one, since it carries more memory, this one has 100 memories, this one has 20, and they're split up between FM and AM. This one you can have memories in either FM or AM, doesn't matter how many you have. You can intertwine both of them, and they're set up in different pages. So you have page 1, which goes to 10, page 2, which goes to 20, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so on. And you have the scan button down here as opposed to being over here. The standby buttons are similar, a little bit different on the newer model. We still have 3 buttons in the bottom, except this one has the enter, erase, and AM band world time. And their tuning steps are similar here on the bottom right. The side here we'll go over with each of these. They're relatively the same size, these two radios, with some exceptions to the aesthetics and the way they implement the antennas and whatnot, but we'll get to that in a moment. But on the side here, you can see the external AM antenna, and it's marked AM external antenna on this one. These both work with a ANLP1 type of antenna. It's an older antenna that came out. It's an active loop antenna, and it's very rare to find. Basically, this puts a voltage on this output here, and you connect the antenna to there, and it's supposed to work with that loop pretty well. Moving up, we have a change here from the old 7600 model to the G model to the GR model. We can see this is a binary switch, a DX and a local sensitivity switch. Basically what that does is it kind of increases the sensitivity of the receiver and decreases it if you need it. It's an attenuation switch, basically, in other words. You can see that here it's marked attenuation instead of DX and local. You have an on and off switch for it, and we have a rotary knob here, which changes the variable amount of attenuation you have. So it's quite more, has more of a gradient than just simple on and off. So we'll keep that off for now. We'll keep the sensitivity to DX just to keep comparison here. We have a line out here, and then we have a headphone out, and then we have the DC input, which is relatively the same. 6 volts in. We have positive on the center pin and negative on the outer pin. On the back, we do have a similar set of features. Basically, you have the stand, which comes out a little bit more easier on my newer model than the older model. It's retained a little bit more, but as you can see, it's similar, same kickstand. We have the grill here for the speaker to kind of vent the radio as well and keep it cool, as well as allow the different tones of frequencies to come out of the speaker as well. We have different, or rather similar, placements of the screws here, 3 in the bottom, and you'll note that if we push this down, we have a raised bevel here, I guess you could call it, or a raised plastic piece with the screw inside of it to kind of give more room for the antenna here, as opposed to here it's flat. And then on top we have a raised holder too for the antenna on top, as well as these screws here on the top. So that is the back. They both run on 4 AA batteries. The battery compartment size is relatively similar, just slight differences in the overall cutting of the unit. Now to the business side of things. With the side here, they're all relatively the same in both models, except for the rotary knobs, a little bit different on the textures. But we have the single sideband fine tuning, plus on top, minus on bottom. We have the upper and lower sideband switches, and then we have the normal sync and sideband switches, and then we have the tone or the filtration filters for news and music, and the volume knobs on the bottom. And then finally, looking on the top, we don't have any buttons for the newer model, but the older G model has the light button on top instead of the front grille. And that is the tour of the both models, the G model and the 7600. As we can see, this one has the time here, and this has a time here. The screen's a little bit smaller on this one. It's got a dipped kind of cut here, whereas this one's just a flat flush, and this has a raised plastic, as opposed to this just being one continuous plastic piece. I do have screen protectors on them because I'm OCD like that, even though they're scratched a little bit, just so you can note that. Let's turn them on and listen to the sound. Let's do the 7600 first on AM.
More than just legislation. If you need a hand with the VA, Social Security Administration, Medicare, SBA, or any other federal agency, just call my office at 631-541-4225. Again, this is Congressman Andrew Garbarino, and my team is here to help. Call us up at 631-5...
Okay, let's try the 7600GR.
Live in New York and need assistance with daily living. You can receive a 100% free service and get help in the comfort of your own home by a loved one. Call Freedom Care now so you can receive daily help preparing meals, bathing, doing laundry, receiving transportation, and more. All done by a family member or friend that gets paid to be your caregiver.
So one thing to note, like I said before with the opening in the back, when you deploy the kickstand, these are really made to be used in that fashion, or at least up, so that you get the maximum amount of frequency coming out. It changes the tone if it's flat on the table, depending on the material. Sound travels differently based on material that it hits, obviously, so the waves are a little bit different. Let's go over some of the UI when it's on. So I'll turn down the volume here. We'll leave it going so you guys can listen to a little bit of the sound on both. Okay, so you can see the standby A and B. A and B is also up here. One of the big differences with this, and yes, it's on. I can see it from here. You can see the tune light and the sync LED, and then in this model, it has the tune and sync as just a simple LCD showing up in the UI. Now, the downgrade here is that this is simple on and off. This one shows a light that either fades in and out on the tune and also the sync lock. So it kind of gives you a more of a gradient idea of how the signal is hitting your receiver here, which is quite nice for the older model. Now, with the newer model, you can change between the frequency and the time by pushing execute here. So you can keep track of the time without having to turn off the radio, whereas this one you would have to turn it off to get to the time and then turn it back on. The lock button again is down here. You can see the icon. You can trigger it on this one. So similar UI system in terms of displaying information, very much the same. Now we can do a test with the light. I don't know if it's going to come out very well in the camera as it is, so I might have to put some B-roll footage there for you. But let's go ahead and turn this off and see the light here. Turn off the lights here. And you'll note the difference between both lights here. On the 7600G, the older model, you can see here on the left, it goes on and then it fades out slowly with the capacitor. Whereas on the right here, we'll trigger this one. It's a little bit brighter and it stays on 100% and then it just drops off completely after a few seconds. See, that just went out and that faded out. So that is the light sample with these radios. And I much prefer the newer light. Now there's conversions you can do. You can look it up online to modify the LED inside of there and put different kinds of capacitors and resistors and whatnot to change the light output. But that is the basic comparison of the SW7600G and the GR, respectively. Both very capable receivers. I got this, I think, for $70 one year, and I got this for about the same price as well, which is considered a steal in this day and age in 2024. I've had this for 2 years, and it's worked fantastic. I do like the sound and tone from it. Does it compare to the newer technology? Not necessarily. The tone and sound of it's pretty unique, and it's a chase for people who want to collect these and use these. Let's compare the features to a ham radio, which I showed before, the Kenwood TH F6A. So this particular radio can receive single sideband as well as CW, and it has different modes, and it has a wideband reception. So that is the nice thing about having the Kenwood TH F6A. And why do I bring it out to compare to the Sony radios? Well, I bring this out because you can kind of see the size difference and technology change. This radio came out in the early 2000s as well and was pretty advanced for its time, and it had a good long run of being in production. I don't remember when they discontinued this. It must have been probably in the 20-teens or so, and the amount of ability you get in such a small size here versus something that's huge from an older generation technology is quite amazing. Granted, though, the quality of listening and the enjoyment experience, I think it's much better on these radios, obviously, with the tones and the speakers. Your ears don't get worn out as fast. So that's one thing to say about the Kenwood TH F6A. However, it does have an attenuator on it, and it does listen to sideband pretty well, actually, and broadcast bands. This also has an AM bar in it, though you can switch between the internal and the external, which is another thing I want to get to, is that the external antenna connection on a radio like this, if you're looking for shortwave listening, is a little bit more modular as opposed to the Sonys. However, these are much cheaper than one of these. These can go anywhere from about $135 to $300 that I've seen online. If you go to a ham radio fest, you'll probably find it for a little bit cheaper in cash, and it's usually a better buy in that case. But I just wanted to show you some of the shortwave radios that I'm listening to and using. And since I have the G and the GR, I haven't seen too many videos kind of comparing them together. So if you're interested in buying one of these on eBay or wherever, just note that some of the main differences is that this has a lot more memories than the older model, the G. This will have a variable antenna tuner. The light's a little bit better. However, it's lacking the tuner lights, the LED light, and the sync light. If you're into using the tuner LED instead, it's a simple on and off. This has a couple pages, and the UI is a little bit different. And this one, it's a little bit more straightforward with the UI. So if you're used to older technology, this might be it. This generally runs a little bit cheaper than the 7600GR. I've seen these go for about I want to say $80 to about $150 online, and then these go for anywhere for about maybe $50 to about $90 or so, maybe a little bit more depending on the condition. That being said, if you're looking for a basic radio that listens to primarily sideband and does broadcast stations, either will be fine. Go with the older 7600G if you don't mind not having as much memory. If you want something a little bit more newer, then the 7600GR is probably the best bet. And that's all I have to say about the Sony SW7600GR and the G. Both fine radios. Recommend you look at it. Thank you for watching, and enjoy your day.